Ladies and gentlemen, the national anthem of the newly formed Ududuwa Nation.
As well as Black and African theatre, literature, and film. So welcome to you, Jo. Let's give Jo a round of applause as we welcome her. And our next speaker on the list, I just want to tell us quickly about our speakers, and then I'll hand over, as I've said. So our next speaker is, next on our list rather, is Professor Emmanuel Nwanze. And he attended the Loyola College Ibadan from 1962 and obtained his BSc Honours degree in chemistry from the University of Ibadan before he obtained his PhD in 1976 from the University of Warwick. He is an emeritus professor in the Faculty of Life Sciences and former Vice Chancellor of the University of Benin. He is a former chairman of the Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities. In August 2015, Professor Nwanze was appointed by the Delta State government as a member of the Delta State Elders Peace Building and Reconciliation Council. A professor of biochemistry, he has published over 70 scientific articles and is a member of the New York Academy of Science, the International Brain Research Organization, and the research body of advisors of the American Biographical Institute. He has a lifelong passion for history. Our next speaker today, the next one on our list, Professor Banji Akintoye. He obtained his PhD in history from the University of Ibadan in 1966. He taught at the history department of Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Nigeria, where he became a professor and director of the Institute of African Studies. He has also taught African history in universities in the United States, including the University of South Florida, Tampa, Florida, and Eastern University, St. David's, Pennsylvania. Akintoye has written famous books on African and Yoruba history and many articles in some of the leading learned journals of history in the world. Some of his books are A History of the Yoruba People, Emergent States of Africa, Coming Revolutions in Black Africa, and Revolution and Power Politics in Yoruba Land, 1840 to 1893. Here's A History of the Yoruba People. Wow. I told you our speakers today have a wealth of knowledge and experience. And I'm not going to continue because the list goes on. And of course, amongst our speakers are we also have some commentators, and our first commentator up is Mr. Dele Ogun. He's a corporate lawyer, historian, and an author of several books concerning Nigeria, including the history of the country titled A Fatherless People, The Secret Story of How the Nigerians Missed the Road to the Promised Land. He is the founder of the Fatherland Group and the chairman of the Yoruba Foundation, a member of the Society of Authors. He is also a regular commentator on Nigerian affairs on TV, radio, and in print. And taking him on today is his sparring partner, Timothy Mordu Jr. He is a son of Timothy C. Mordu, who was a chief negotiator for the Biafran government during the war. He has a deep-rooted interest and practice experience in conflict resolution and community relations. He is a social entrepreneur with more than 30 years practice experience and passion in promoting and protecting community interests in sustainable development across the UK and Nigeria. He is a chartered manager by profession, studied public policy and management, MSc at the University of London, and also has qualifications in business management from UEL Business School, as well as earlier chartered certified accountancy studies. He is a member of the Chatham House and is currently exploring his father's legacy before, during, and after the Biafran War. Amongst other high-level public policy and management work in the UK, he has advised numerous public sector bodies in Nigeria. We also have joining us all the way from South Africa, which is absolutely amazing, Dr. Biki S.V. Miyuku. Dr. Miyuku studied at the University of North Limpopo in 1973. He has an MSc in personnel management, my apologies, from the University of Cardiff. He has an MBA in Management and Marketing Communications, La Salle University, and in 1985, he graduated with a PhD in Social System Sciences, Interactive Management, and Planning Systems from the Union Graduate Institute in conjunction with Interact, the Institute of Interactive Management, Cincinnati, Ohio. Bear with me. Let me just run through this very quickly. He's a former university registrar, CEO and CAO Vice Chancellor of the University of North, now University of Limpopo, former CEO and CAO of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of the Republic of South Africa. In recent years, a national continental and international project and programs consultant and monitor of evaluations of the USAID funded RSA TELP, the Zambian USAID DEO grades, and so on. Dr. Miyuku has also served as one of the Republic of South Africa's DOJ's ministerial commissioners to transform defense intelligence and as executive secretary of the presidential of the presidential commission of inquiries into the mandate and location of the RSA. So I'm just going to stop there because, the list goes on. So I do beg your pardon, sir, if I don't mention absolutely everything. And we also have some performing artists with us today. Unfortunately, Marachi Atama is not able to be here in person, but we do have a recording. She's not able to be here due to personal reasons, and we have to respect that. And of course, our very own Mr. Ion the First, Mr. Culture, who will also be sharing with us today through his amazing drums. Ion the First, aka Mr. Culture, is a UK-based cultural ambassador, founder of Oduduwa Talking Drums, and the CEO of the African Culture Gala Night UK. I could go on, but he has performed for just about everybody. Is it Her Majesty the Queen? Is it celebrities? Is it, helping children to learn how to drum? He is simply amazing when it comes to sharing his culture and demonstrating and teaching others about his culture. So that's the lineup that we have for you this afternoon. So let me not take any more of your time, and I'm just going to simply hand over now to our chair for the day. If you remember, I mentioned her earlier. Let's put our hands together and welcome Joe Willian. Hey Joe, you're welcome.
Sorry, apologies, it's Ayon that performs first according to the program.
My sincere apologies for that. I have jumped the program and gone to Joe. Ayon, please take it away and perform. Mr. Kochi, you're on mute.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being part of the conference. The musical instrument I'm going to play called talking drum. So we use it for different things, and I'm so happy to have heard, about achievements of all our speakers. However, there's no way we can have the speakers without welcome them with this magical musical instrument. It is talking drum as VIPs. Thank you, everybody. I believe that everybody might have been wondering what I've been saying with my drum. The drum actually welcome everybody. That is to say, Káàbọ̀, ṣe dáadáa lẹ́dẹ̀, àwọn tí ń retí ẹ̀yin. Káàbọ̀, ṣe dáadáa lẹ́dẹ̀. That simply means welcome everybody. We have been expecting every single one of you, and did you arrive safely? And also the drum recited prayer, that is to say, Odi Peki, Odi Peki, Ire gbogbo pàdé mi lọ́nà. Odi Peki, that means that may blessings and fortunes comes our ways. And the talking drum wish everybody Happy New Year as well. That is to say, Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to everyone. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to everyone. Happy New Year to you. Just before I go for an hour or so, let me just appreciate our wonderful doctor who is celebrating his birthday today.
Oh, show, carry.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Culture. Thank you.
Thank you.
And on that note, we would like to wish our professor once again, Professor Emmanuel Wanze, a very happy birthday. We'll be wishing you a happy birthday throughout today, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Culture.
Thank you.
I know that we also have a video play from Amarachi Atama. Are we able to take that from our technical? Thank you. We don't have the volume. Okay.
Ọkụkọ ekpokogudu munya ke ochegwe maka na ọmarụ na ntandu munya ke egbe chọtar munyi rugide ala yọgide maka na ọmarụ n'oge jekoje mite kpụrụ egbarakata tigide kwụshiga egwu ejide ọdono maka na egbarakata agbụgegwu ikorodo alụ n'onwe onye na-abịa kwagide egbarakata anyị nụrụ ụba anyị bịara ugburu egbe mmadụ gụ na-adachichi ke isi ụkwa mana ugoda amaghị na ọchụgide ngwere na-enye n'onwe onye ji ekwu isi n'ụhọ elelele tọntị n'alụ ka ịbịa n'ụmụakụkọ anyị o nwere akụkọ uche anaghị echefu o nwere ụzọ ụkwụ ga aja niile bilite kọba akụkọ ihe mere mgbe gara aga o nwere ihe aka ga-emetụ ọjụba ajụjụ maka na anya ahụgo aka emetụgo mana ajụjụ kejuru n'ala lobi ya o nwere ụda ntị nụ akpata oyi ezuo ya ahụ niile akụkọ ihe mere na-aba anyị bụ aki ekweghị ọtịta dai uche amarago ihu dezuro ịkọrọ ọnwụ dara na be anyị mgbe gara aga mmiri manyụrụ ọnwa akwụchara n'ọmụ nkwụ asịkwana mekuna maka nọ na bụ mụ na ndị okenye kpawa anya ha niile na-akọwa akụkọ ụfụ mkpamkpa dị egwu kpara na be anyị mkpamkpa dị egwu kpara na be anyị maka na-erugharị taa onye mere anyị n'ihe ekweghịkwa ala mma na egbe ogbunigwe na agụụ bịara anyị ọbịa gbasasịa ili na be anyị niile anyị bịakwutere anyị na-akwadoghị akwado gaa n'ezinụlọ niile were ihe anyị bịara dịka ide mmiri kpochapụ ọtụtụ ndụ ụmụaka ọwọrọ n'ike tupu ha chaa echefughị m nwa mgbe ofesi gbara onwe ya ọkụ n'iwe ọtụtụ lara n'agha ọtụtụ bụ ihe jikọrọ ha ọtụtụ bụ ejirimara ha ọtụtụ bụ ọṅụ udo na ezumike akụ na ụba anyị niile gwụrụ agwụ nke bụ na ya bụ agha ka na-erugharị ncheta ihe mere anyị echefughị nke ya bụ maka ncheta ndị niile anyị furu n'agha ọ dịghị ihe anya hụrụ gbaa mme anya ahụla ihe gbara ya mme mana anya kpọrọ anaghị ebe ọ ka dị n'isi anyị ka ọ dịrị idozi ala anyị ka ọ dịrị anaghị agbakwa ka arịelu ọjị ka anyị jikọọ aka hichewebe anyị anya mmiri nke anyị megoro n'otu ọ fọrọ hụ njikọ aka nkwụcha abụghị ụjọ maka na ihe ụga na-ata ntị na anụ ya anya na-ele anyị bụ anyị iwe mana mgbe ọbụla anyị jidere akpụ egwu atụgbo ofe ogwumagana sị na ya agaghị eji n'ọkụ gbara ọzara hapụ ije ngala ya na nna ya na-adị ya aga n'agbanyeghị na akụ na ụba anyị niile soro agha laa anyị ka na-aracha ofe ejiri okporoko sie ọchụnwa ọkụkọ nwekwa ada o nweghị ihe ijiji ga-eri ka ọ ghara ka ehi ka anyị gbadokwa anya maka na enwe hapụ osisi aka akpara ya ka anyị gbadokwa anya maka na ụbọchị aka hụrụ ntị ọ maghị ụra okpukpe n'aka ghara nkụ aka ọ bụrụ njide nụrụ ọnụ mo maka na ekwughị ekwu mere ọnụ a na-ekwu na ọdụ enwe pere mpe dinta ewere ma na-egbuburikwa ya ihe egbe na-eri adịghị udele mma mana ọfọ ka nsị ya dị ire ya furu ala anyị ya furu aja anụ a na-agba egbe ọ na-ata nri ya furu iyi ya na-awa ọ na-adị ndụ ya ka ifuru na egbe a na-agba igwe bụ mmebi isi egbe ala titubere ugo anaghị anapụnwu ya osisi kpọrọ nkụ a na-ele anya ọdịda miwara mkpụrụ ihe egbe na-eri adịghị udele mma mana ụmụ Chukwu riri elu ọjị kpaa ya nkụ chi gị kwara gị akụ onweghị onye ga-egbochinwu ya ọhịa wọrọ anyị nkụ bụzi ebe azụmahịa anyị ala chi ya tere ude na-egbu nri ya ka mmanya biya furu n'agbanyeghị nchọrọkọta nchọ niile ala anyị bụ achara na-egbu ọ na-eto.
Thank you to Amarachi. Absolutely fantastic. Let me say to all of you who are online, welcome once again. I see you all the way from Australia. It's 2 a.m. and you are up. Thank you to all of those who have signed in from every part of the United States. I see you from Canada. I see you from Aberdeen. I see you from Lagos. I see you from the southern part of Nigeria. I see all of you and I welcome you all. And we're looking forward to your questions. Thank you for participating today. Please use the question and answer box to contribute your questions, and whatever contributions you may have, please do that in the chat box. I appreciate all of you taking the time to sign in today and join this conversation. So I can now finally hand over to our chair of today. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's put our hands together and welcome Joe Williams. Hey, Joe.
Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Fatherland Conference on the Fate and Future of the Igbo and Yoruba Nations. It is my great honor, privilege, and pleasure to have been invited to chair the Fatherland Conference, speaking with one voice. As well as our distinguished speakers, commentators, and performers, I am personally particularly pleased to welcome Dr. Minyuku, formerly of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. In my younger days, I spent many hours in the company of South African and Zimbabwean exiles in London. It occurs to me as I say this that I have never thought of any Nigerian as an exile or even as a diasporan. I have instead usually described those I know as Yoruba or Igbo, or indeed Hausa as appropriate. You may be as surprised as I was, however, to learn that for some people, including an old Caribbean writer friend of mine, Nigerians are so English, which was his explanation of why he laughed when I told him I had been to Africa after my first trip to Nigeria. I have to tell you that English is one word I never use to describe myself, any more than I want to be identified by the color of my skin. When pushed to conform and tick a box to describe my ethnic origin, I tick other and write Celtic, that being the origin of my family name, Whelans, which I have on good authority comes from the Gaelic Ophelin, meaning wolf. It was only in preparing my opening speech for this conference that I found out the meaning of the Greek word Keltoi, from which the term Celt or Celtic is said to derive. It means barbarian, which means that this badge that I have been so proudly and possessively wearing all these years is in fact a term of abuse, conferred on me and mine by whom? Since the term first apparently appeared in the 18th century, it was obviously not the original Celtic peoples themselves. From my point of view, there is at present a rather uncomfortable increasing focus on Englishness as opposed to Britishness going on in this country, exacerbated, of course, by the departure of the UK from the European Union and the growth of Scottish nationalism, exemplified by the emergence of the Scottish National Party as the dominant political party in Scotland. Now, just as at the time of independence, the independence debate in Nigeria, so in Scotland, at the time when union with England was proposed, the question of whether Scotland should join with England and become part of the United Kingdom, or whether a federation model would be more appropriate, was discussed. Interestingly, the Scots were apparently persuaded or manoeuvred into becoming part of the United Kingdom on the basis that this would increase Scottish independence more than a federal system would, which is rather the opposite of what the Nigerians were apparently told, although I have to wonder whether Nigeria didn't end up with a rather disunited kingdom instead of the more equal federation some might have thought they were getting at the time. Scottish scholars have long identified creeping Anglicisation as one of the key factors eroding Scottish independence and the values Scottish people adhere to, especially in the fields of law and education. The thinking and the expression of it by influential authors like George Davey and Tom Nairn was a key factor in the development and push to prominence of the Scottish National Party. According to recent polls, the greater part of the young voting population of Scots now favours independence as part of the European Union. The thorny issue of sovereignty for a country which still has a sovereign is yet to be grasped. I want to turn now to the topic of the conference today and say a few words about what the Fatherland Conference means to me and why I think it's important. It is a truth worth telling that any system, including that of government, is only as good as the people operating it. I personally believe in a system of representative democracy, but as recent events in America have shown, it is necessary not only to have a system, but also to ensure that it is properly understood. And in order for that to happen, every individual participant or participating business or institution must be properly educated and informed on what it takes to operate the system properly and fairly. Unfortunately, in my experience, no such attempts are generally made, to our collective universal cost in the political difficulties and human and environmental tragedies we can see all around the world these days. This, to me, is where the Fatherland Conference can make a contribution by encouraging each person and people to speak their truth as they see it, as a first and most important step on the road to a fairer society. For I believe the human struggle for a good system of government is everywhere essentially the same. At the end of the day, the central dilemma still revolves around the question posed by Jean-Jacques Rousseau way back in 1762, almost 30 years before the French Revolution of 1789. He said, I'm going to read it in French first and then give you my English translation. He said, trouver une forme d'association qui défende et protège de toute la force commune la personne et les biens de chaque associé, et par laquelle chacun, s'unissant à tous, n'obéisse pourtant qu'à lui-même et reste aussi libre qu'auparavant. Tel est le problème fondamental dans le contrat social dans la solution. So he said, to find a form of association which defends and protects with the combined strength of all the person and the goods of each associate, and through which each, uniting with all, answers, however, only to himself and remains as free as before. Of course, for Rousseau, the social contract was the answer. Such is the fundamental problem to which the social contract gives the solution, he said. Clearly, given that the French Revolution still took place some 27 years later, Rousseau's words either fell on deaf ears or were not understood or thought impractical. If they had been listened to and put into practice, Might the French still have achieved a state founded on the principles of liberté, égalité, fraternité, without all that oppression, slaughter, and bloodshed? Truth is necessary in order for democracy and justice to flourish. Without adherence to truth, facts that are not true can be said to be true, and honest questions of sacrifice never end up being discussed. When was the last time a politician asked, "What are you prepared to give up to stop homelessness or climate change? Pay more tax? Have less luxury? What?" The debate in Nigeria, as elsewhere, badly needs to move on from the what to the how. So much is already known but never acted upon or put into practice, primarily due to lack of good governance. This is where the Fatherland Conference can make a real contribution by allowing the what to be truthfully debated and defined in order to move on to the how of progress. Perhaps it is no longer a question of speaking truth to power, but of speaking truth to each other, taking back control of the dialogue, listening to the truth of others, and taking responsibility for consciously determining how we would like to be governed and by whom. Thank you. And now I must seamlessly slip into my role as chair. But before I do, I just want to acknowledge how much I enjoyed both performances. Although I must say Amarachi's performance almost brought me to tears. I thought, oh dear, I must control myself and dry my eyes because I'm going to speak in a minute. So thank you to both performers. And now we will hear a comment from Dele Ogun of Fatherland. Dele, over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm especially grateful to you for your participation today as a Briton, because this is a story that was made in Britain, and it's a story that the British people need to hear and to understand. And as you and I know, governments make every effort to ensure that some of the things that are done in their name are never heard and never brought to the knowledge of their people. So I'm especially grateful to you for your participation. Ladies and gentlemen of this conference, again, thank you for your participation. In the conference pack that you received upon registration, you will have seen a chronology of the key events which I thought define the relationship between these two great nations. It is not my intention to take you through the detail of that chronology and what is catalogued there. I simply want to comment on 4 dates in particular. And my screen is now being shared, and here are the dates. Our first date is February the 26th, 1906. This was the date on which what was the colony of Lagos, which includes the Yoruba mainland, was amalgamated with the protectorate of southern Nigeria to bring the two nations, Igbo and Yoruba, into political association for the very first time, under the shared identity of southern Nigeria. We have done the research, and we can say without any fear of contradiction that there is no record of any crisis between these nations before that 1906 date. There was no war, no invasion, not even a border skirmish, for the simple reason that the Igbo and the Yoruba do not share a border. The Edo are situated in between these two great nations. Now, the emblem for this colonially induced union is what you have seen on all the publicity surrounding this conference. As you know, our people are very quick to question any suggestion of colonial mentality. And so it was not long before we were challenged as to why we were using the coat of arms of King George VI. And I've had to explain that it was designed for southern Nigeria by the British. Now, I want you to take a very close look at the imagery. On the west side, you will see the lion with blood on its claws and around its mouth. On the east side, you will see a unicorn. And ladies and gentlemen, if you look very closely, you will see that the unicorn is chained to the ground. Now, those of us who went through the English schooling system from an early age will know the story of the lion and the unicorn, who were always fighting for the crown of King of the Jungle. Let's move to the next date, 1st of April, 1939. April Fool's Day, 1939, was the day on which the Governor Bernard Bodilon partitioned southern Nigeria into east and west, i.e., these two nations, which had been brought together into political union in 1906, were now being divided. Why was this done, you may ask? Was it that the Igbo and the Yoruba were fighting? The answer is no. Did either of them ask for the separation? The answer is again no. It was done because the British colonial government wanted to do it. And they wanted to do it as part of their plan for northern rule of Nigeria post-independence. Now, it is important to stress that it was not the plan of the North, our northern brothers, even though some of them now claim that northern domination was a product of superior northern strategic genius. It was not their doing or design. The next date that I wish to talk about is 15th of January, 1966. This was the day of the first military coup in Nigeria, which culminated in the unification decree and the abolition of the loose federation and the substitution of a unitary and powerful central government. But just as northern rule was not the plan of the North, although now credited to them, this was not the objective of the coup plotters, although it is now attributed to them. They were responding to the state of misrule in the country and the culture of impunity that was taking hold, similar to the situation of the country today. Specifically, they were responding to the virtual civil war situation that was raging in the Western region and the crude manipulation of the 1964 federal elections in the Eastern region, in Igbo land. The crisis the coup was responding to, therefore, had Yoruba and Igbo roots. This is why there was a Yoruba and Igbo mix amongst those who carried it out, albeit that the majority happened to be Igbo officers. One of the key objectives of the coupists was the release of Obafemi Awolowo, Premier of the Western region, from prison. We take our evidence on this not from the Igbo side, lest this be dismissed as self-serving, but from the Yoruba officer who was one of the 5 lead plotters, Adewale Ademoyega, in his book titled Why We Struck. Let's now move to our final date, 29th of September 1979. This is 9 years after the end of the Biafran War with, so we were told, no victor, no vanquished. But this was the day on which the Abandoned Properties Decree was published. The decree was published by a Yoruba man, General Olusegun Obasanjo. it had the effect of declaring forfeits to the government properties belonging to Igbos in Port Harcourt, which were not at the date of the decree in the physical occupation of the owner. Now, what do you think this did to our Igbo and Yoruba peoples? But wait, why was this decree published just 2 days before the civilian government of Alhaji Shehu Shagari, a northerner, was due to take over from Obasanjo? And what about that 29th of September date? It is this date, ladies and gentlemen, that gives the clue as to what was really going on. You see, because 29th of May 1962 was the day on which the state of emergency was declared in the Western region, in Yoruba land. 29th of May 1966 was the day of the first round of pogroms against the Igbos in the north. 29th of July 1966 was the date of the second round of pogroms against the Igbos in the north. 29th of September 1966 was the date of the third round of pogroms against Igbos in the north. And here we now see 29th of September 1979, the Abandoned Properties Decree, nominally signed and published by Yoruba man. But look at that date. This is the reality of the relationship between the Igbos and the Yoruba. The context in which all the events that have caused controversy between us needs to be understood. This brings us round to today's conference on the 15th of January, 2021. It is the day on which Igbos and Yoruba together say, we are no longer going to play the role of the fools that was assigned to us by the British colonial government from 1st of April 1939. We will follow the example of those officers, Igbo and Yoruba, who were outraged about the political condition in their country, who were tired and wanted to go beyond simply talking about it and moaning about it, to do something positive in order to change what was and is an unacceptable political situation. They joined hearts and minds, notwithstanding the propaganda and the petty bickering of the political class. They joined hands and minds to change the trajectory. 15th of January, therefore, is a date that should be remembered by Igbos and Yorubas alike. We both had a stake in the events of that date. Those of us who will be played the fool no longer are now claiming this date for a new understanding, overriding all the divisive propaganda. We do so towards setting right all that is obviously wrong in this country which we now share together. Thank you for your attendance and thank you for listening. I hand you back to our chair.
Thank you, Dele, for that contribution. And now I think, first of all, I have to say happy birthday to him. I hand over to Professor Emmanuel Nwanze. Over to you, Professor Nwanze.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the birthday wishes. My small talk is titled, Yoruba Igbo, Leap Forward More and Look Back Less. For emphasis, I repeat, Yoruba Igbo, Leap Forward More and Look Back Less. The introduction is that the antecedents of the numerous failed attempts at the unification of the Igbo and Yoruba have been well chronicled by many more competent persons elsewhere. I hope my audio is coming out well. Notable among these is the landmark event of January 18th, 2018, acronym Handshake Across the Niger, HON, which was held in Enugu. The short treatise here, titled Background and Key Themes, provided for us by the convener of this conference, Barrister Dele Ogun, is also very incisive. In particular, the narrative and breakdown of 1, the genesis of the political rivalry, 2, the maintenance of the rivalry, 3, the consequences of the rivalry, and 4, the solutions to the rivalry is pointedly apt. Only in the last paragraph dealing with the solutions to the rivalry do I hold some divergence, which I will dwell with fully in my conclusion. Pedigree. Seeing that this speaker is just a simple folk scientist of the biochemical and neurological sciences, the pertinent question to ask is, am I, Emmanuel Wanze, qualified in the first place to stand among giants of the humanities and law, history, sociology, and political disciplines to banter such serious issues? Issues for which nations have been known to go to war. Issues indeed for which we ourselves fought a most vicious, no-holds-barred civil war. I refer to the Nigeria Biafra War between 1967 and 1970, in which well over 2 million souls perished, not to include displacements, etc. My answer to the question posed is an unreserved affirmation. Affirmatively, yes, and that by all accounts, I am this very day, as Madam Chair has observed, this very day, 15th of January, 2021, at 72, a very senior citizen of Nigeria, who, although never been a card-carrying member of any political party in Nigeria, nonetheless have been very keen, albeit alarmed observer during most times of the political somersaults of the Nigerian political class. Moreover, the 10-year span, 1962 to 1972, from when I arrived at Loyola College in Ibadan to begin secondary education in 1962 to when I graduated from the University of Ibadan in 1972 and left for Warri for graduate studies, I consider as probably most cherished and certainly most eventful years of my life. It is beyond dispute that Ibadan was a live wire and epicenter of politics in Nigeria. And what was recorded there between 1960 and 1970 epitomized the political theater of the times. Independence in 1960, Operation Wettier and state of emergency by 1962, the 1966 series of coups and pogroms, the 1967 to 1970 civil war were upheaval galore, pressed down and overflowing for any individual to experience in one's lifetime. Crucial ingredients for a meaningful Yoruba Igbo summit. In order to truly forge ahead meaningfully, we must identify the critical factors as well as notable proponents of such factors wherever they can be found in our common cultures. For ease of presentation and discourse, I intend to consider only 3 such philosophies from among what I'm sure must be a plethora of possibilities. Understandably, because education has been my tuft all these my 72 years of life, I have no hesitation in giving education the primacy of place above the other 2 philosophies: peaceful coexistence, and 3, commerce and industry. Education, especially the type and quality that will produce the Chinua Achebes, Wole Soyinkas, Ola Rotimis, Vincent Chukwuemeka Ikes, and Chimamanda Adichie of today, is a sine qua non for nation building. 3, the philosophy of education and its major proponent among Igbo Yoruba culture, Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Now, when in 1954, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, as Premier of the then Western region of Nigeria, got the Western Region House of Assembly to pass the bill on compulsory and free primary education in the entire region, his contemporaries in other regions laughed him to scorn. How will it be funded, they queried. It will lead to massive quality flight and resultant drift in standards, they opined. But like the true visionary that he was, Awo persisted and prevailed. The Awo experiment proved beyond reasonable doubt that provided policymakers and economic planners are committed to prudent and frugal planning, the UNESCO recommended appropriation of 26% of GDP for education is easily achievable. But are our leaders genuinely interested in education for all? Rather, it will appear, as can be deduced from the ease with which layabouts and hoodlums were recruited to neutralize and foil the legitimate campaign of the #EndSARS movement earlier this year, that those in charge prefer to stagnate and deny education to the masses while sponsoring subterfuge. Yours truly here in 1955, when my then guardian, Mr. B.O. Wanze, enrolled me for primary school at Mokola, Ibadan, was a direct beneficiary of the Awo free primary education, as it was derogatorily tagged in those days. Now, without meaning to be modest, you can judge for yourselves whether from my academic / educational trajectory, the Awo education can be remotely described as inferior. I and many of my contemporaries who benefited from the Awo free primary education went ahead to compete most favorably with the best anywhere and everywhere in the world and at all levels. Philosophers all through the ages have come to recognize the value of education as the glue that binds society and promotes robust societal growth and development. Plato, 428 to 348 BC, observed that, and I quote, "Ignorance is the root and stem of all evil," end of quote. Winston Churchill, 1874 to 1965, noted that, and I quote again, "The truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end, there it is," end of quote. Jawaharlal Nehru, 1869 to 1964, wrote that, and I quote again, "Ignorance is always afraid of change," end of quote. The great American philosopher Mark Twain, 1835 to 1910, wrote that, and I quote again, "I never let my schooling interfere with my education," end of quote. And the great scientist Albert Einstein, 1879 to 1955, observed that, and I quote again, "Education is what remains after one has forgotten what one learned at school," end of quote. And coming nearer home, our own Nelson Mandela, 1918 to 2013, recorded that, and I quote again, "Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world," end of quote. Now to myself. So today I say to you, my audience, and to all our leaders, loud and clear, fix education and you have fixed the nation. Indeed, the woes of our nation today, insecurity, Boko Haram, armed robbery, armed banditry, cattle rustling, kidnappings, ritual killings, 419, and all forms of advanced field fraud, including drug abuse, sexual harassment, and all manners of exam malpractices and misconduct, are all traceable to our collapsed educational system since 1960s. It is almost a doomsday situation. Awo was right, you know, with his declaration of free primary education in 1954. 52 years later, in 2006, at the Commonwealth Ministerial Conference in Cape Town, South Africa, which I was privileged to attend, the Commonwealth pronounced, and I quote, "access to all" as the adopted education policy. So, my dear friends, we must therefore restructure our education now, not tomorrow. 4. The philosopher king of peaceful coexistence. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. John chapter 15, verse 13. This is the spiritual injunction which distinguishes the agape or divine nature of our Lord's love for us. Indeed, for those who abducted Ironsi and Fajuyi on July 29, 1966, and demanded unsuccessfully of Fajuyi to dishonor himself by handing over his boss and guest, the shame remains theirs, even until this day, and even, I dare say, far beyond, eternally. This is what distinguishes, in my mind, and I'm sure it is obvious, and sets aside Colonel Adekunle Fajiri as the greatest of the philosopher kings that have come out of the two cultures of Igbo and Yoruba nation. This outpouring of love at the back of Green Springs Hotel off Iwo Road, Agodi Ibadan, behind Loyola College, where I was at that time with my peers preparing for the 1966 West African School Certificate Examination, should be a most compelling clarion call for Igbos and Yorubas to bury the hatchet and forge ahead. From this conference, on a new course that will define the best practices of coexistence for good governance for generations to come. The historical perspectives and accounts of who caused the failure of previous attempts at rapprochement, or who organized the first carpet crossing, or who and why the Aburi Accord flopped, ought to firmly take the back seat now. No, one is not advocating that these experiences be cast away altogether, as if they never occurred. Rather, they are to be reviewed periodically, if only to remind us of George Santayana's quote that, and I quote, "Those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it." End of quote. This is thus my point of departure from the aforementioned conclusion titled Solutions to the Rivalry in Dele's compilation. I have described the sage Awolowo as a philosopher king. This is very consciously done, and for good reason too, and purely because of the sheer phenomenal and monumental importance of his contributions to education in the nation, which for me, as I said, is sine qua non for the growth, progress, and well-being of any society. By so doing, I am not unmindful or oblivious of the many policy failures and directives attributed to him as well, such as the 1951 carpet crossing, his defense of starvation as an instrument of war, and so on, for which many Igbo persons will continue to hold him accountable and find it difficult to forgive him. Yet, alas, I say, show me the saint amongst men. Show me the saint among us, our philosopher kings in industry and commerce. Now, if the Yoruba and Igbo cultures are to celebrate anything at all, for which each of them can claim excellence, it is in the fields of enterprise, commerce, and industry. Both cultures have and are still producing men and women of timber and caliber, as the saying goes. Giants of industry and entrepreneurship, such as Sir Louis Odumegwu Ojukwu, Chief Timothy Adeola Odutola, and Chief Sonny Dike Odogwu of blessed memory, who have left their marks in the sands of time. In contemporary times, names such as Chief Innocent Chukwuma of Innocent Motors, Chief Femi Otedola of Xenon Oil and Gas, Mr. Tony Elumelu of UBA and Hess Holdings, Chief Jim Ovia of Zenith Bank, Oloye Subomit Balogun of FCMB, and myriad others frequently come up. The Igbo Yoruba nation possesses so many of these personages who have invaluable contributions to make to our discourse. We must work out the modalities by which we can consult them and render them inclusive. Finally, my proposal for Fatherland Group to consider and adopt. It is proposed that as a way forward from this inaugural meeting, the Fatherland Group should consider for adoption the principle of defined philosophy domains for which philosopher kings from any axis of Yoruba Igbo culture can be identified. The three domains I have mentioned here of education, peaceful coexistence, and commerce and industry are not necessarily exclusive and can be expanded as considered necessary. What matters is that any philosophy considered and adopted is added as one of the beacons for action. We should work towards identifying serious contenders who will be willing to draw up a blueprint for the union to realize the Igbo Yoruba nation. I thank you for listening to me, but in particular, I thank Mr. Dele Ogun for inviting me to be part of this wonderful event. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Professor Nwanze, for that most interesting and informative talk. I will go and look at it again afterwards. Now, Professor Akintoye, welcome and greetings. I hope you are hearing me all right and ready now to come and present your talk to us. So over to you, Professor Akintoye.
Thank you very much. I must start by thanking Dele Ogun for putting this whole program together, and thank all the other persons who have made it possible for him to make a success of it this afternoon. And thank you, our chairlady, for your contributions to this historic moment in the history of the two great nations, Yoruba and Igbo of Nigeria. I agree entirely with Professor Nwolise that what we should learn to do, what we should use this conference this afternoon to do, is to look forward rather than look backwards. Because when we look backwards, we are looking at the history of two very highly developed people who allowed themselves to be pitted against each other, and who have propagated that culture of rivalry, even hostility, which some people call a war between their two nations. The Yoruba and the Igbo were not very much in contact before colonial times, but they started to come into very close contact from the last years of the 19th century. By the time Nigeria was amalgamated in 1914, there were fairly good numbers of Igbo people in Lagos and other parts of Yoruba land. And there was no hostility between them. These Yoruba people have a cultural trait that I think the world now knows, namely that they regard foreigners as and strangers in their land as people deserving of welcome, hospitality, and help. And so the history of the Yoruba people is replete with examples of people who came from totally foreign lands and became very important and became even chiefs in Yoruba cities and towns long before the 19th century. And it's all people. Hausa, the Fulani were not very much known about, but Hausa, Nupe, Edo, Bariba, and towards the end of the 19th century, some Igbo began to come. And Igbo and Yoruba were not enemies in those years. They were not at all. There is an account given by my friend and colleague, Professor Adele Afigo, that the Igbo, when they went out of their homeland to go and trade in other people's homelands, had a philosophy of life which says, he who goes out to do business to live, to make a living from going to other people's lands, cannot afford to have enemies in those foreign lands. That was the Igbo philosophy of life. So the Igbo were very polite, very nice to their hosts everywhere they went before European colonialism. And the Yoruba, of course, had a wider reach in the world. They had for centuries been trading north into Hausa land, east into Kanuri land, beyond the Kanuri territory to what is now Sudan and South Sudan, a part of Central African Republic, and many parts of the West African coast.
From
yeah, But the Yoruba and Igbo were not enemies. When they first met, it was the usual Yoruba thing, oh, our brother, which is what the Yoruba believe about all human beings from anywhere. There is a verse in Ifa which says, in Ifa, which is the compendium of Yoruba wisdom, which says, the stranger or foreigner will come, accept him and take care of him and help him. Because in doing so, you are accumulating benefits from yourself, for yourself in the house of Olodumare, the God who created the world and rules over the world. That's the philosophy. I can tell story upon stories in about 1780. We have the story of a Hausa man trading in the Oyo city of Oyo-Ile, who went into the palace to complain that some Oyo boys had stolen some of his merchandise. And the reaction of the Alaafin was way out. He said, here in this town, treating a foreigner like that. And what he then went to do was terrific. In the Oyo Empire, there were whole chieftaincy titles that were designated to foreigners. And in many Yoruba towns, there are chieftaincy titles that are held by people who are of origin that is not Yoruba. So it is a part. So when the first Igbo people began to come in fairly good numbers in the beginning of the 20th century, it was the same old Yoruba attitude and the same Igbo attitude. The Igbo attitude I said earlier on, and I was quoting from my friend Adele Afigo, former professor of history at the University of Nigeria. He said the general attitude of the Igbo who left the homeland, who left the cultural area to go to any other place, among other people, was he who goes out of the homeland, he who goes out of the cultural area cannot afford to have enemies out there. I must be friendly with everybody. And that meant being polite, earning love and respect and cooperation and help wherever they went. That's the nature, that's the true nature of the Igbo people. All the aggressive attitudes that people have been complaining is all a product of colonial times. A product especially of a tradition that started in the 1930s. Dedogun has a book, Fatherless People, and there is a small account in it of Zeke returning from America in 1933 with very highly blown ideas of Pan-Africanism, the black man in the world, and so on and so forth. Well, he was vulnerable. He was a poor person, and he wasn't getting the kind of help that he desired. He had applied for jobs to many organizations and many agencies back home in Nigeria, and none of them had given me a job. And he arrived in London on his way back home, and that vulnerability put him in the hands of the colonial authorities. Basically, what happened, the British respected the Yoruba, but they didn't particularly like the kind of black man that the Yoruba were. They didn't like it. Because by the time they came, the Yoruba were already fairly highly educated. They had been producing graduates from the last years of the 1850s. And by the time that the British began to come into Yoruba land in the 1880s, 1890s, there were already very many Yoruba graduates in very many areas of life. And when the British finally became the rulers of Nigeria, I'm jumping over a whole lot of things. They didn't fancy the Yoruba at all. They might be friends with the individual Yoruba people, because the educated people for them to be friends with were mostly Yoruba. But they feared that the Yoruba were going to make the profits of colonialism difficult to achieve in Nigeria, that the Yoruba will bar the way to the earnings from the British enterprise in Nigeria. Because essentially all these things we call new countries, they were trading arrangements. Winston Churchill said in 1902, we didn't go to Africa to build countries. We went there to trade. And that's the truth. We went to Africa to trade. So people thinking that, oh, these people came and created countries for us. They didn't create countries for us. They created trading establishments for themselves. And that's why when the British took over, they began to discourage the indigenous traders in places like Lagos and up the Niger. Because this is our venture and the purpose is trade. So the British didn't particularly like the Yoruba and thought that they needed to subdue the interests of the influence of the Yoruba people in Nigeria. And according to the account in the book that I have quoted, Fatherless People, Mordu Jr, who was a scholar of the colonial establishment, got hold of Nnamdi Azikiwe, took him to meetings with British colonial officials from Nigeria who were at the time in London, and finally arranged a meeting between him and a team of people from the colonial office. And what seemed to have happened in those meetings is that the British wanted to construct the Igbo and the Yoruba as enemies of one another, so that they would not be able to collaborate, because these are the two most powerful people in Nigeria. If the Yoruba and Igbo collaborated, the British thought that that would be the end of all the benefits from their colonial endeavor in Nigeria. And so Azikiwe arrived in Nigeria, the man who had left London with very high-sounding ideas of the black race, the black man, and so on, Pan-Africanism, and etc., arrived in Nigeria not so much dedicated to those ideals anymore, and so on. But as I said, we, the Yoruba and the Igbo, we allowed ourselves to be pitted against each other. I don't want to tell the story. The story I want to tell is the story of change and the future. We are now at a point in the history of the Yoruba and the Igbo nations when a substantial number of the Igbo and Yoruba people now recognize the following things. One, that because we had chosen to allow ourselves to be used against each other, the Yoruba nation and the Igbo nation allowed themselves to be used against each other in Nigeria, both have now ended up in a position that is only better than slavery in Nigeria. They have lost everything. And now they're just fumbling around in the hands of people who are dedicated to an idea that they must own Nigeria, they must rule Nigeria, they must control Nigeria. And they must make sure that the other peoples of Nigeria do not control their own destiny. That's what Ahmadu Bello said 11 days after independence in 1960, on October 12. The South we treat as conquered territory. We must treat the South as conquered territory and not let them ever rule over us and never let them control their own future. If he was prophesying that day, the prophecies have come true. If he was laying down marching orders for his people, they have succeeded in achieving what he wanted. That's the truth of the matter. So the Igbo must now learn Okay, it's all right for us to be teaching our young people, our sons, to be abusing one another on the internet, on the social media, and so on and so forth. But we did it in the past. We have done it since the 1940s. And what we have earned from it is slavery in Nigeria. We can continue to do that and become more and more slaves in Nigeria, until maybe perhaps the Igbo and the Yoruba nations disappear. Maybe. But hopefully it is not going to be so. I was part of this Yoruba struggle from my undergraduate days in the 1950s. I was part of the Yoruba struggle when the rest of Nigeria combined in the National Assembly in 1962 and foisted a dictatorship over Yoruba land, a sole administrator appointed by the federal government. Those things rankle in the hearts of people. And then there are people, my friends, that are friends of mine, who are already grown up when the Civil War started in 1966. And the Igbo people were unbelievably brutalized. And we Yoruba took part in it. We were part of Nigeria. And for Nigeria, we were ready to raise our hands against our brothers, the Igbo people. Oh, yeah. It has been horrible. It is time for us to turn around and begin to behave like the great nations that we are. We are not fools to be led in the nose, to hate one another, to be constantly pitched against one another, to seek advantages against one another in what is called the federal arrangement in Nigeria, the national cake. It is folly. It is time the Yoruba and the Igbo develop their own agenda of where they want to, what they want to be and where they want to do, what they want to do, where they want to be, and how they can collaborate and work together to achieve their purposes, rather than continue to rival one another for shares in the government of Nigeria. Sharing from the government of Nigeria is not the destiny of a great nation like the Igbo. It's not the destiny of a great nation like the Yoruba. Developing their own destiny, which Ahmadu Bello said we will not let them develop, is their real goal, is their real quest in the world. And it is time they began to do that. So fortunately, we are on the way to doing that. In early 2017, some very major step was taken. The newly elected leadership of Ohaneze sent a delegation under the newly elected president, Nneamwodo, to come and meet with Afenifere in Lagos. That was a landmark step. I was there the day Nneamwodo brought his delegation. And that night, I shed tears of joy, because I had never believed I would see that. I had participated in discussions around Chief Awolowo as one of the young intellectuals from Ife, in which we had very definitively decided that the road forward for either the Yoruba or the Igbo is that the two of them must learn to work together. But nothing had come out of those discussions. In 1984, May, after I was released from detention by the military ruler Buhari, Chief Awolowo invited me to Kenya, and we spent a whole day together at his house. And I want you to listen to this, let everybody listen to this, because it's a story that I need to be telling, to be standing on rooftops in Igbo land and Yoruba land and be shouting. We spend the whole day, Chief Awolowo, usually when we meet, it's about Nigeria, and we spend the whole day talking about the prospects, the difficulties, the bland, and so on and so forth for Nigeria. And then it was time for us to go to dinner about 4:35. And as we stood and went towards the dining table, Chief Awolowo stopped me and held my hand and said, Banji, there is something more I should not forget to tell you. So I stopped and looked at him, and he said, Banji, we Yoruba must find a way to work with Igbo. I said, you and Igbo will work together. It's not a question of must now. You and Igbo, he was now talking as if he was prophesying. He had started by saying you and Igbo must work together. But then he upgraded his talk to something like a prophecy. You and Igbo will work together. It is the only way you can be free in the world. It is the only way we can be free in the world. It is the only way we can really achieve what we deserve in the world. You and Igbo will work together. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm quoting him as much as I can remember. I am not saying it is going to be easy, but I am saying it will be done. That was May. I can't remember the date. I was released from detention end of April or early May, and I went to see Papa about 5 or 6 days later and spent the whole day. It was at the end of that day that Papa said that to me.
Prof, may we round up, please?
Yeah.
Thank
you and Igbo will work together. It is only when you do that that you will achieve your goals in this world, your destiny, your deserved destiny. As he was talking, there was a knock on the door. It was one of our other leaders, Saolane Ajayi. Saolane Ajayi came in and joined us. Papa said, Alane, come and hear what I'm saying to Banji here. And so Saolane Ajayi joined us. He was wearing a suit. He apparently been for court or something. I don't know, because he's a lawyer. And he came and joined us. So there were 3 of us. And he said, Papa said, Banji, I have been telling you, and now I'm telling you and Olane Ajayi, the Yoruba and Igbo will work together. It is when they do that that both of them will achieve their destiny in the world. And the 2 of us stood there and looked at Papa. Then we walked towards the dining table and we had dinner. And the day came to an end. I told this story in 2017. I told it when we were planning Handshake Across the Niger. And it was one of the motivators of the movement that produced the Handshake Across the Niger. I was the chairman of the committee that planned Handshake Across the Niger. We had members from the Yoruba diaspora abroad, from the Igbo diaspora abroad, the Yoruba intellectuals in Nigeria, and so on and so forth. We even wrote a book by 2 young professors, one Yoruba, one Igbo, Akintoye and Ojiako. And I wrote the foreword to that book. Sometimes when I go back to read that foreword, I have tears in my eyes. I said in that foreword, given the predominant character of the relationship between the Yoruba and the Igbo nations in the past 6 decades in Nigeria, writing the foreword to a book proclaiming any joint Yoruba-Igbo celebration of anything must be, for any Yoruba or Igbo person, a profoundly emotional encounter with history. But when God's time comes, it comes. But when God's time comes, it comes. Whether in the life of an individual human or in the life of a nation, or of nations. But time has come in the lives and the relationship of the Igbo and the Yoruba nations of Nigeria. And when God's almighty hand is stretched forth, nothing can bend it back. Yes, God's time has come. God's time has come in the affairs of the Yoruba and Igbo. And we have to all better realize it, all of us young men and women and old men and women and all politicians and so on. This is the time when the Yoruba people and the Igbo people must learn to join hands together to put together their enormous capabilities and achieve for themselves their true destiny in the world. I want to say that personally I have been very happy whenever I remember the little I have contributed to this. Following upon the handshake across the Niger, which was a huge festival, when all our leaders just went out, when we Yoruba from the southwest were welcomed into Enugu as we were princes from some great kingdom of the world. I say these are brothers, the Yoruba brothers, they, all princes, the Igbo princes, welcoming the Yoruba princes to their city and so on. It was a wonderful experience. And the result has been that more and more of our intellectuals have been doing research in the historical and cultural relationships of the Igbo and the Yoruba. And we are now finding that we are essentially one people, the Yoruba and Igbo, we are essentially one people who have separated over a long time in their history and have developed their peculiarities that may be different, but also have a great deal of commonalities in our culture, in our language, and so on and so forth. That is being discovered day by day, and I followed the research. It is exciting. We are one people, and we are not just the one people. There are other peoples who share the same family relationship in the Nigerian context. The Gala, the Edo, the Bagi in the north, the Nupe, whom the Yoruba call Tapa, and so on. We were the same people originally, according to archaeologists. We formed as separate groups on the Niger in about, we were already there in about 38 BC as hunters-gatherers along the banks of the river. This is from the very best of archaeological research in our time, published mostly in the 1950s and the 1960s. But we were too hostile to one another and we were too busy fighting one another that we didn't see it. We didn't see the scholarship. We didn't see the fact that we are being rolled out by the best of scholarship in archaeology.
Professor
Now DNA research is adding to that. And we are getting to know more and more that these people called the Yoruba and these people called the Igbo have a great deal in common in their history, in their culture, in their everything. The research is going on. And some of our young intellectuals are excitedly pursuing the research. But the last dregs of the hostility is still out there. You open your social media and some Yoruba boy, Yoruba and boy and some Igbo boys are fighting one another and saying horrible things about the Yoruba nation, about the Igbo nation. It is backwardness. Young people should not be backwardness. They should be the people leading their nation forward. So I want to appeal to young people. Lead us forward. The future belongs to you more than to people like me. I'm an old man. But it will give me great joy if I can see our young people, all of them, Igbo, Yoruba, and so on, really begin to treat one another as brothers. Really begin to treat one another as brothers and sisters.
Professor Akintoye, sir, I hope you can hear us. We seem to have lost your sound. Okay, Joe, can we come back to you?
Thank you. Professor Akintoye, I hope you can hear. I fear you cannot. But anyway, I want to thank you for continuing to share with us your historical perspective from your own very relevant personal experience. And I fervently hope that your wish for the future can come true. And so now I need to hand over to Timothy Mordu for his commentary. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
You're welcome.
When you listen to great minds like Akintoye, I'm still in awe on the message and information. I was mesmerized and my mind focused, and I think I have to come back. Like you said, we need to all come back to listen to him. He's got a lot to offer, and I'm so grateful. Not just to him, but I use this opportunity to thank all the speakers before me for their excellent contribution and enriching our knowledge on the day of this historic conference. You see, let me start by introducing myself in the context of this conference. First, I want to say I am an Arrow stock. And to be precise, I'm from Arundizog town, presently in Imo State, southeast Nigeria, the same town as late great Mazin Mordu Jr, the boycott king and the first deputy mayor of Lagos in 1951. Mordu, who is a relative of mine on my wife's side, Azuka, is a true African statesman, an iconic political figure of his time. He was also a writer, activist, economist, politician, and a wise counselor. And don't take my word for it. Read My Africa by Mordu Jr, published in 1954, 2 years before he died at the age of 44 in 1956. And you get the sense of the uniqueness of this cultural, economic, and political icon. Also, from Arundizog is late Dr. K. Mbadiwe, who was also another great national political figure. And the useful backdrop to my insight for what I'm about to contribute here is taken from the perspective from my father's unpublished archive and useful communication with the powers to be inside Biafra. My late father, Mazi T.C. Mordu, to put it mildly, was a significant order in the external facing side of Biafra between 1967 to 1970. In his official capacity as the chief negotiator for the government of Biafra, he worked closely and intimately with General Philip F. Young, Ojukwu's number 2, General Ojukwu himself, and others like Colonel Bernard Udegu, the Director of Intelligence, Biafra Defense Headquarters, and many other key players in the Defense Headquarters and the Biafran Civilian Administration over the 30 months of the Biafran existence. like many from the southeast region of Nigeria, who stood firm against injustice, against ruthlessness, and the genocidal killings of their own kin at the time. Most of them came forward and patriotically served in whatever role and capacity they were called upon to do in order to defend the rights of their own people, the lives and the property. Many of them, children, women, and men, paid the ultimate price of death, and in some instances, cruelty, in their millions, in a contrived so-called war, for just daring to be free from a Nigeria that no longer served and protected its citizens. May all those innocent lost souls in that era and now continue to rest in perfect peace. So please permit me to say this. Anyone who attempts to write or speak in a brief compass on a theme of this nature, Igbo-Yoruba partnership, is immediately confronted by a number of difficulties and pitfalls. The most obvious is the danger of abstraction. By that I mean displaying only essential information with little opportunity to present a full background and comprehensive detail of the subject matter under discussion, especially if trying to stand from where I'm sitting, first as a child during the Biafran War, with some vivid nightmare memories of that time, and second, as someone whose father, as I've already summarized, worked closely enough with the top leaders of the Biafran government. It therefore raises another kind of question in my mind, which is, can one meaningfully reduce the almost infinite variety of responses in a society as culturally and politically diverse as Igbo or Yoruba nation to a shorthand that bears a meaningful relationship in reality, especially when these nations have been shaped by some super political and cultural factors in recent times? I guess for me, I have to accept, alongside my fellow Igbos, that these kind of conversations must start somewhere at all levels with all the seriousness and attention that the subject matter deserves, not least because of the existential threat the situation in Nigeria poses to all of us, especially those of us who are people of the southern Nigeria. I give thanks to the bravery of some individuals who took personal risks to break the silence of speaking up about the genocide experience of the Igbos in 1967 to 70, an increasing number of people are now coming forward by the day to share the experience of the war, which until recently was a taboo to speak about it in Nigeria for fear of persecution. Thanks also to the information age generation, technology advancement, and access to high-level documents relating to the war and the actors locally and internationally. There is now an increasing number of us across Nigeria and in diaspora who have read most of our forefathers' books and people before them, researched and studied numerous materials, watched authentic videos and documentaries about a crisis in Nigeria over the last 60 years. We have amassed sufficient information on the subject of Nigeria and its colonial past. And most importantly, the history of the people who lived in that land space called Nigeria. We have also come to learn the true history and the culture of the old kingdoms in Nigeria, who were the indigenous peoples of those kingdoms, the history of some of the early expeditions of foreigners to that land. We have learned also the agenda of those foreigners who came to our land, all it being in the name of religion, faith, education, or so-called civilization. So I believe that if we all work together, as many speakers before me have said, with a new understanding of the past and the present, we should be able to forge a better future that will be resilient enough to change the course of direction of the Yoruba and Igbo nations with our true friends and families. But first, we must move away from a predatory thinking mindset and address the issue and the question of trust. How can we improve the level of trust between Igbo and Yoruba? How can we intelligently de-risk or at least reduce the fatal consequences of flagrant breaches of trust in the past between these two great nations? How do we checkmate the opportunists, the spoilers, the invisible hands of today, tomorrow, and the years to come? Using our numbers and our global footprint in many global systems, trade, and professions, how do we safely lead, showcase, and mainstream this newfound way of cooperation with one voice in promoting a diverse culture, economic, politics for mutual benefit of all, including the Black race globally? These are just few of the questions on trust that come to mind that needs to be addressed. But for me, there is a solution. There is hope. There is a way to deal with trust. I'll leave you, tell you a story about how the subject of dealing with trust was dealt with in a very high complex situation, which I believe can be applied very easily here. This is the story behind the phrase trust but verify. Trust but verify is an old Russian proverb which came to global prominence when Susan Mayes, an American scholar, met with President Ronald Reagan many times between 1984 and 1987 and taught him this Russian proverb and advised him that Russians like to talk in proverbs. She said to him, "It will be nice of you to know a few of these proverbs. You are an actor. You can learn them quickly." The proverb was adopted as a signature phrase by President Reagan, who used it frequently when discussing US relations with the Soviet Union, especially in the context of nuclear disarmament. After Reagan used the phrase to emphasize the extensive verification procedures that would be enabled by both sides to monitor compliance with the treaty at the signing of the INF Treaty on the 8th of December 1987, his counterpart, General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev, responded, "You repeat that phrase every time we come to meeting." To this, Reagan answered, "Because I like it." While Reagan quoted the Russian proverb, Gorbachev quoted Ralph Waldo Emerson, an American philosopher who had also been, who said that the reward of a thing well done is to have it done. So there you have it, Igbo and Yoruba. I am sure we, the Igbos, can easily relate and adopt such concepts, since we also claim that, just like the Russians, that our language is endowed with idioms and proverbs. Some saying, I think the same saying goes to Yoruba friends too. So where there is a will, there is a there is a way. So can the Igbos trust the Yorubas? Yes, of course, we can. But trust must be verified. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Tim, for sharing your unique perspective and your wise closing words on trust. And now I hope that Dr. Minyuku is receiving us loud and clear. Dr. Minyuku, can you unmute yourself? It's your turn to come in, please. That's it. Welcome, Dr. Minyuku. You're on. Over to you now.
Thank you, Chair. What can one say after what we have been so well informed about? Perhaps as an insider-outsider, African, of South African origin, I must place my comments outside of the box, but in context. And I'm hoping to make very few comments so that you can remember them for a very long time. But having said that, once you talk about time, it has to be relative to purpose. And one crucial thing about today is that, for me, this is the beginning of an everlasting thing of beauty, equaling dialogue. So many of us don't want to actually engage one another and just simply understand the basic things in life. I said, let me place my comments outside of the box. I also wanted to say that today is tomorrow's yesterday. I appreciate the fact that we would want to look forward. But the first thing I would like to indicate is that there are striking similarities between, we may call them, for example, we can say the troubled relationships between, if I'm allowed to say so, troubled relationships between the two nations that you're talking about. From a South African perspective, I would even say poisoned relationships. But let me indicate why I say poisoned relationships. It's because on one end, we are talking about truth. And truth is painful. And it's not cheap. If you imagine from what Timothy has just said, truth may be cathartic to those people that actually are survivors. Some of us may even call them victims. No, they are survivors. But speaking truth is not necessarily speaking it to power. It is a form of catharsis for them in order to deal with the future going forward. And you need platforms like this to be able to speak truth even to power. Imagine if we say that there are politics of encroachment in this poisoned relationship, but we do not want to confront the perpetrators who poisoned the relationship. It is almost like saying that let's feel good about talking and absolutely do nothing about things that affect us on a daily basis. So, if truth is that painful and not cheap, it means we need to confront our realities. Now, I'm saying that includes confronting the reality of those who poisoned the relationships. Now, coming from South Africa, if I was Meryl Streep, I'll demonstrate what the Prime Minister of Britain, Maggie Thatcher, said, but I'm not Meryl Streep. She literally said, you cannot enjoy, and remember, she was promoting a system of apartheid. She was saying you cannot put the Zulus and the Xhosas together. These are belligerents, according to her. In fact, they will be at each other's throats. They would never enjoy the peace dividend. From what I know, and I'm not even a historian, I just know as a South African, there have never been any war between the Zulus and the Xhosas in South Africa. Any war that I know of record. But some South African listening, they probably can point at one or two skirmishes. But those will be normal skirmishes. Now, imagine an outsider telling South Africans that they can never be peace. Maggie Thatcher actually referred to the Xhosas as ex-Xhosas. She couldn't say Xhosas, as if they are not human beings. We still are suffering that legacy up till now. The history of Maggie Thatcher is very recent. The history of apartheid is recent as 1948. But the history of racism starts real back through the history of social contact. I wanted to indicate that whilst there are striking realities that has been mentioned, South Africa has suffered triple oppressions, maybe even more than triple. For that matter, when we look at the comments and my comments and what has been said, the first thing that I really wanted to indicate is that off the record, our good professor mentioned the Asaba massacre. I may not be able to put it in context, but I can juxtapose the Traspit massacre in KZN in South Africa, the Bishop massacre in the Eastern Cape. Remember, KZN is where the Zulus are, Eastern Cape is where the Xhosas are, but those massacres were not perpetrated by one against another. They were perpetrated by the system and the legacy that we've inherited. So poisoned water need to be unpoisoned. And how do you do it? Here is a platform that has been established. You need to create an environment. In this case, maybe it's an environment and a climate. It is this platform as an example of openness, transparency, and full disclosure so that you can deal with the future. As long as there is no full disclosure, you're not going to be able to deal with the future. You'll not be able to cleanse any wound that was caused. Having said what I have said, I'm tempted to also indicate that if you just chop an onion, the pungent smell is going to get into your eyes. That's different from when you enjoy when that onion is already braised, it's fried, and you are not even thinking about the pungent smell. Now, most of what we are talking about now lies with the political conflicts of the past. How do you deal with the political conflict of the past? I cannot claim to have solutions at the back of my hand because there is no off-the-peg way of dealing with such things. But we can learn examples from other places, including South Africa. It could be an example where we can learn something from. Now, I would want to say that a national apology, when people and a country are then put on a brink. In the case of Nigeria, it was actual war. In the case of South Africa, it was at the brink of a precipice. Without that national apology, you're not going to be able to address those political conflicts of the past. You're not going to be able to hold this dialogue both here as well as in Nigeria, and succeed. In fact, some of the leaders who were there, I'm leading to the second point, that it requires leadership and leadership. Some of the leaders are still alive. Our good professor mentioned Obasanjo is still alive. And if you care to imagine that these things are solvable, we have had some examples of how to deal with it from Timothy here. Then what are we still waiting for? We were lucky in South Africa. We had a constitutional mandate because we had to start afresh. And the Constitution of South Africa, actually the preamble of that constitution, is the founding act of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa. Now, please don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa solved all the problems of South Africa. But it did put all of us on one page to reckon with our political conflicts of the past. And it is, you cannot sneeze at it, because you have human rights violations that have been verified, Timothy. Verified by both perpetrators and the victims, or the survivor at the same time. So you can't sneeze at that. And neither do you have a situation where you have politicians that then declare we shall have a truth commission by way of an executive order. Ours was the function of a constitutional mandate. Now, you don't have many like that in the world, because the world already has evolved. South Africa was just beginning. So we were fortunate to be at the beginning. Perhaps next to South Sudan, we are the only country with a flag that has got 6 colors. So I'll leave that for your own imaginations. I wanted to also say that let's not leave this issue of leadership and leadership. That is not only speaking about age or ageism. Even amongst the youth, we do need to make sure that we mentor those who have got a potential to lead, principled leaders. Because otherwise, we will keep on being revisionist, hoping the past will become today and tomorrow. Let me mention my last point. In summary, somebody said to me, and perhaps I should declare, it is my president, and I'm not being sacrilegious. My president is my wife. She said to give, and use the word, the number 2, to give, and to get, 2, the number 2, get, are so easy. And historically, they've been so easy that some people have never bothered about the generosity of spirit they deal with. They come into the area, and I think our good professors have indicated that, with a Bible in one hand and a gun in another, and they just take without being apologetic. But we have to be apologetic when they have poisoned our relationships. That must stop so that we move forward with confidence. Now, how does it stop? Forgive. Now add the number 4 and say forgive and forget. You can forgive, but you must never forget. And I think this is the message coming from Timothy. And what is it that which you can forget if you are a centered African? Very few things that you can forget. That even includes your history. Your essence of life is actually your history. That's why I said today is tomorrow, yesterday. And it is important that we actually think out of this box where I am and accept that there is a place to study history. And I believe it was actually, again, our good professor, Mwarinze, who said, unless you want to be victims of the same error that has been perpetrated and committed in the past, you will then not want to study and understand history. I said I understand that we have to transition into the future, but then we must transition by bracing that onion. First, we need to understand that onion has got a pungent smell. And how do we fumigate the pungent smell? It takes that leadership. It takes this dialogue session that must move from Zoom to the actual environment back home. It actually takes even exploring alternative forms of justice. Truth and reconciliation commissions are nothing else but alternative forms of justice. If the outcome is not justiciable, then you must know that you still have a long way to go. I want to conclude by going back on that point and hope that I have saved a little bit of time to say that politics of encroachment shouldn't make us to actually quickly accept that we created problems. We should simply accept that they are problems of our own and own them, but also own the processes going forward of resolving such problems. It can be done. Let me thank everybody as well, and hope that I have added a little bit value outside this box.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Minyuku. Very, very interesting to hear your experience from South African perspective, which I think definitely chimes in with the purpose of today and should be helpful going forward. So thank you very much for that. And now, I've got a line here saying the compare opens the Q&A session, but I also, all right, I see, yes. Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. So Priscilla, I'm handing over to you now to open the question and answer session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joe. Much, much appreciated. And thank you to all our speakers and contributors. As I said at the top of this conference, they had a wealth of information to share. And wow, have we not learned so much today. We've had so many great instructions, but more than that, we have had so much going on in the chat. Thank you to all our contributors and speakers. Yes, it is time for the question and answer session. As we did ask at the very beginning, please put your questions in the Q&A and we will take those. So I'm going to start now with our first question. So give me a moment. Our very first question that we have, I think this question is important. Even though I think that certain things have been mentioned, I think it's important that we answer this. And I want to put this to Professor Akintoye, because I believe you mentioned this when you were speaking, sir. So our question comes from Mr. Ndubisi Isima. He says, handshake across the Niger has been a hallmark of relationship between the Yoruba and Igbos, but which has not actualized in practical terms. What are the basic steps that both sides must take to cement the relationship between the two tribes? Prof, please, if you can just give us a brief answer to that. Thank you.
Yeah, there has been a lot of welcome developments on handshake across the Niger. You would have noticed that from the very top all the way to the bottom of society, there has been motion in the right direction. Leading Yoruba Obas are now constantly involved with Igbo rulers, and Igbo rulers are constantly involved with Yoruba Obas. Like the Oni, for instance, is visited Onitsha. The ruler of Onitsha has visited Ife, And there have been conferences that have been called by different, especially a young man called Prince, organized a conference on the basis of the research that is going on, that involved all the rulers of the South and Middle Belt. And as I said, people are doing research, are turning out information. And yes, the beginning has been enacted. The development upon it, the developments upon it are coming. For instance, it is because of the Yoruba handshake across the Niger that you had the people of the South-South, the people of the Southeast, the people of the Southwest, and the people of the Middle Belt coming together to form the Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum, which has become a very influential organization in the affairs of Nigeria. It is also because of that a more dynamic organization that seeks the self-determination of the Igbo and the Yoruba has now arisen. The Nigerian Indigenous Nations Alliance for Self-Determination. That is new. This could not have happened before the handshake across the Niger. Yeah, there has been a lot of development. The level at which we have been inadequately effective is the level of the young men in the social media. They are the kings and queens of the social media. Old people like me know nothing about social media.
Prof, forgive me. I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir. But he just wants to know, what are the basic steps? Now the different groups are coming together. There are formations. Are those steps sufficient for this relationship to improve going forward?
Yeah, no step will be sufficient until we are really working actively together as two nations. It is what we are having as groups within the Igbo nation and groups within the Yoruba nation working together. That is not enough, I agree. We must reach a point at which we sit down together and evolve our strategy for dealing with our problems as challenges in the Nigerian situation. We have to reach that point. We have not reached that point. So as long as we do not reach that point, what we are doing remains inadequate.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you. I have a lot of questions that are coming through asking. So let me bring this one to you, Sir Dilly. The question Olukemi Atijosan is asking is, what is the outcome we are looking for after today's conference?
Well, first of all, I'm not Dele Andele Ogun, but...
my apologies, sir.
The outcome, primarily, we've already achieved it, which is to get an understanding of the context in which the events and the incidents which have been used to divide these two great nations, to get an understanding of the context in which all of that needs to be understood. Whether you can argue on the detail of what happened, but once you've got the context in mind, then we're able to move forward. So that's the real object. But I will say more as to what will be next steps when I give my closing comments. Thank you.
Okay, so while you're there, sir, Dr. Fatima Lawson's asking, where do we put the houses in this discussion?
Again, good point. Probably anticipated by my closing comments. I will deal with it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So if I know some of you are just putting your questions in, if we can simplify the questions, it's very, very helpful. So Austin is asking, Austin has a lot of questions, but let me just take this one. He has questions and comments. So bear with me a second. Okay, let me come back to Austin's questions in a moment. Let me take this one here because I think it's much easier. I lost pace with his question a moment ago. right. I have Honorable Henry Iwanofo. He asked, do we accept that the Igbo and Yorubas are the same people because of the similarity in the language they speak? I think that's been mentioned to an extent. So do we then accept that they are looking at the different languages that they speak? And then his question goes on to say that when Martin Delaney visited Abeokuta, his guide was Chief Ogbonna, listed as native the land of Abeokuta. What was an Igbo man doing in Yoruba land, and how did he get there if we were different people? So, as I said at the very top, we have coexisted quite happily, although we've had issues, but we have learned to coexist. So are we the same people? Would we say that, sir? If I use the word sir, Dele Ogun, it's not because you're a sir, it's just me addressing you, if you may.
I thought that question will probably be handled by Professor Nwanze.
Okay, Professor Nwanze, please.
Both languages.
Okay.
Very fluently.
Professor Nwanze, would you say that from your experience of speaking both languages that we're simply just one people, that is the Igbos and the Yoruba nation? And the fact that we have Igbos, because I believe that his question also addresses the fact that Igbos, move around the country as far back as, we can remember and to date. Does that just make us the same people? Professor Nwanze, you're on mute, sir. We can't hear you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. You're mute again. Thank you.
Thank you again. Once again, that question is best answered by a sociologist. That's true. However, one thing we must recognize is that the dynamism of integration in societies makes it inevitable that across boundaries and over centuries, over long periods of association, two different people will ultimately coalesce as one. So I think my answer as a scientist is I see no difference among the two people. But if you want to get the nitty-gritty of it that has emerged out of tons of research, you want to talk to the experts.
Are you not an expert, sir?
Not on language, not on linguistic groupings. Professor Akintoye is far ahead of me on that aspect.
But once I have you there, sir, VJ Femi is asking, the way forward, what solutions can we prefer to bring about a successful harmonization for both nations?
Well, if you want to come together, you learn to come together. You make definite, deliberate efforts to come together. A group of young people called me about 2 months before a handshake across the Niger to their annual conference, an Igbo youth group. And when I spoke at that conference, I became like father to a very large number of Igbo youths who are still my friends today. We need to be more active in promoting contact and relationship. Yoruba organizations need to learn to bring their Igbo brethren into their activities, and Igbo organizations need to learn to bring their Yoruba brethren into their activities. And old men like Nwodo and Ayo Adebanjo and me and so on who are moving around need to create the atmosphere. Oh, during the celebration of handshake across the Niger with our Igbo brethren called Chief Adebanjo, they gave him an Igbo title and so on, Yeah, there is a lot we can do together. It is when then we must understand the inevitable differences between two peoples and be tolerant. and be tolerant of the differences, and even learn to love at one another. Not learn to love at the Yoruba learn to love in a brotherly manner, not the old fighting one another and so on and so forth. We are moving forward. It is slow, but we can speed it up. I'm sure that we can speed it up. We need to speed it up. So I would suggest that this discussion this afternoon should not end with this afternoon. It should continue. We should get together and begin to ask ourselves, what can we do to speed this thing forward? And I'm sure that the answer is in that type of contact. How do we speed this thing up? Let there be continual discussion about how to speed it up. How are you?
Okay, sir. So,
thank you.
Oh, Professor Wanze, please can you mute your mic?
Yeah, sorry.
Professor Akintoye, I'm coming back to you.
Okay.
On that note of what you've just said there, what will be the modality to encourage the Yorubas to establish businesses and homes in Igbo land as the Igbos do in Yoruba land? And that's coming from Fabian Owezin.
Yeah, well, you must know why the Yoruba are not as many in business in Igbo land as the Igbo are in Yoruba land. There is a feeling, a fear, but we must now let the Yoruba know that the fear has gone. It is time to go to Igbo land and invest there. One of the governors once said to us, listen, I'm going to create an estate in a major, I don't want to mention names, politicians and so on. I'm going to create an estate in this city and make land easy there for Yoruba people to acquire, and so on, in Igbo land and so on. Well, good idea. If he would do that, that would be a great thing. Then the Yoruba will know that, there are all sorts of stories that Yoruba people tell among, Lagbaja lo showo nile awon Igbo, won daru mo lowo ni, and so on. So you will find a lot of Yoruba people in the non-Igbo areas of the east, in the south of Igbo land. And you will find very few in Igbo land. Now, when we break that and the Yoruba man knows, or Yoruba woman knows, that he or she can go to anywhere in the east, establish business, and he will be treated with friendship there, and business will prosper there, then we would have arrived. That will be a major part of this movement. That has to be a major part. The Yoruba cannot continue to stay clinically away from Igbo land. Okay. If they continue to do that, it will be difficult to really build a brotherly relationship between the two peoples.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much for that. Tim, I'm going to come to you now, sir. I have a question here. Although the Yoruba and the Igbo nation they're part of the southern part of Nigeria, of course. But I have a question from Olusegun Ayode, and he's asking, why are you not involved in the South-South, considering the fact that they border between the Yoruba and the Igbo nations? How would you draw the new map without them? When do you envisage this project would materialize, considering the politicians have started jostling for 2023 elections?
We involved the South-South immediately, actually, because within weeks of the handshake across the Niger, the Southern Leaders Forum emerged, because the people of the South-South came out and said, it should not just be you. We are here too, and we want to take part, so we said, we are sorry. So we welcomed them. So we created a Southern Leaders Forum. That was months before we created the Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you, sir. Tim, can we please hear from you?
Right. Okay. Well, there are a number of points, a number of issues on that question. I think the first thing first is when the idea of Igbo and Yoruba to really talk, part of the thinking in my mind was that unless these two big nations within the South region resolve and be clear on their relationship issues, other brothers and sisters within the southern region will not necessarily have what you might call southern Nigeria will not be a secure place going forward. So over the years, what has happened in the politics of Nigeria is that every other combination have spoken and tried to forge a relationship, but nobody have actually asked, could it have made a difference if Yoruba and Igbo fundamentally agreed and had an understanding? And my view is this: if we, even in the 60s, when Awolowo advised for NCNC to come and let them form government, I don't think that the politics of Nigeria, or indeed the southern Nigeria, will be in the way and the mess it is. So we're going back to history and saying, where did we get it wrong? And most of the speakers have actually explained very clearly there is need for other nations within the southern Nigeria to actually wish and promote this idea of a joint relationship between Yoruba and Igbos to get that understanding, that everybody then gets that understanding, because that's the basis, I believe, that a strong relationship between Igbo and Yoruba is only a strength for the southern Nigeria. Otherwise, any other arrangement will be undermining for that region.
Thank you so much, Tim.
I think the question, yeah. I don't know if there's any other. I think the question had a few parts there, but unless Dele has something to add on to it as well.
I think that addressed it. I do have another question that, probably, because I know Dele has a lot that he's going to include later when he comes on. So I'll move on to this one. Rotimi Akinbola is asking, what will working together actually look like? Regional integration, political integration, national conference. Yoruba and Igbo have the same source, and that is the River Niger. So what will working together look like? So let me go for it.
Well, it's very interesting now, and I'm glad that the person who asked this question, it's a very, very apt, it's a very, very good question. The reason is this: very often, if we take the politics of Nigeria, when people say that they are nationalists, very often they don't distinguish what part of in being a nationalist. Are you saying economic nationalism, cultural nationalism, or political nationalism? Now, the best guide I got was from Mordu Jr that I referred in my speech, who in his book, My Africa, was very clear. He was of the opinion that in countries like Nigeria, or even entirely in Africa, we can strive to have some kind of economic nationalism, because we will trade, nobody's an island. You can have economic relationship. You can have cultural relationship. But when it comes to political relationship, you've got to be very clear that you know exactly where you are. In other words, his advocacy was, for the purposes of even this relationship, that you can, for Yoruba, Igbo will certainly consider the idea of economic integration, relationship, cultural integration. Now, when it comes to political side of things, what you should have a cooperation, because you still want to have every of these sub-regions having a very strong understanding and be able to politically manage, so that you come into a table like a union. People still be able to make the decision. It's like what we have in England, in the UK here, the Scotland still make their decision. So that is a political relationship that you sit down so that people will be able to make some decisions, but on a cooperative way. So I think going forward will be to be clear in our mind what you are having corporations on and what you're forming a union on, and separating the economic, the cultural, and the political side of it. And that's what Nigeria as a whole, that's the basis of even anybody considering the future relationship in that country called Nigeria, because too many nations are involved.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Let me just quickly come to you, Dr. Munyuku. I have another question here. Rotimi Akimbola is saying, there are already many groups. How are we going to bring them together under one umbrella? And I'd like to know from you, sir, what can you suggest from your experience?
Let me borrow from what our professors and keynote addressers have said. For starters, you need to find common ground, and there are various things that are already common to everyone beyond what separates us. In fact, even yourself mentioned that this issue of diversity is actually the strength that makes us who we are. I just wanted to piggyback on that and say, it's worth considering.
Please continue, Doctor.
Just as an example of South Africa, remember South Africa has got, many people think it's 11 languages. It's actually 27 languages that are protected by the Constitution in South Africa. But those languages are spoken by individuals. Yet what is actually uniting all of us is the quiescence. The byline of our Constitution says, that actually is united in our diversity, we become stronger. We recognize that, yes, we belong to different ethnic groups. That on its own is an advantage, but it's not an advantage that actually cuts across if you're talking economic nationalism, political nationalism, as we have been saying. We ought to recognize and respect each other's cultures. That's what this means. But we also ought to recognize and value the rights of every individual. Having said that, it sounds esoteric. Practically, is what happens on the ground. You just said right here, Priscilla, that one of the questions that you raised, they were saying the Niger is the common denominator to the two groups. If I heard well, you start with those little things. Don't they say in Ghana that little grains of sand make the mighty ocean roar? You really have to build on those little things in order to make sure things happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I'm going to, Joe, if I may ask you, because I think at the top you mentioned this, and I know that Dele also mentioned it when he spoke. This is a question coming from Ken Falano. I think it's such an important question. What arrangements worked pre-1940s? And can we learn from such arrangements? Because pre-1940s or when Nigeria was brought together, the Igbo and the Yoruba nations coexisted quite happily, or they existed in their respective nations, and there wasn't a war. We have no recorded, incident. So, what was there beforehand, and how can we learn from that?
Do you mean in the United Kingdom rather than Nigeria?
No, I mean Nigeria, because I think you mentioned in your presentation that before it was brought together. Before Nigeria was brought together, the two nations, they existed without any.
I think the point I was trying to make was to draw a parallel between what went on between the countries of the United Kingdom and what I understand went on between the various nations of Nigeria and the colonial invaders, not to call them masters. And I think that Dele Ogun is the living expert on what was there in Nigeria before that. I myself would not presume to speak about that. So if I may swiftly pass...
Stay there. Stay there then. Stay there for me. Stay there for me whilst I have you. I'll come back to Dele in a moment with that. So stay there for me, because I do have a question. Chinedu Wosu wants to know from you. He has a question. Igbos and Yorubas are ready and prepared to let peace and unity reign. Is the British government prepared to allow that happen without pitching the Yoruba against the Igbos or vice versa?
Well, here is my sound advice from experience of living my 73 years under the rule of various governments in the United Kingdom. Do not ask them, tell them. Do not use the word allow. Would they allow it? It is up to you not to let them to allow it, which means that you must focus first on yourselves. Make yourselves as important as you truly are, despite all these years of being masked, possibly behind the English language, which is a great language, but it has this very deadly grammatical construction, which is the third person singular and plural. So that any white man, and I use the words advisedly, once he says, therefore it can be said that, what he has learnt somehow very cunningly to create, probably while in Nigeria and trying to pretend that, you know, David Livingstone discovered the Niger, etc., etc. You know, what he then creates is a universal truth. So please bear in mind that those universal truths may very well just be one Englishman's opinion of moonlight. So I would hand it back to you and really, really encourage you to think for yourselves, get together for yourselves. I do think you will have to think, as Tim said, about how to manage the political side of things, the political structures. And that's where I come back again to, you know, for me, representative democracy is a very sound structure, but it takes a lot of hard work. And this is part of what you're doing now, is the hard work, you know. So I hope that that is a little bit helpful in answering the question from Chinedu.
Thank you for that, Joe. So Dele, back to you. And whilst you're responding to the question of what was pre-1940s, can you also address this question from Chris Akingbade, where he's asking, do we have genuine intentions amongst the leaders? From your research, what can you tell us, sir?
Yes, let me deal with the question of what was there before. It was actually 1914. And in fact, I should say before 1900. Is a simple answer. All of these nations and their 371 ethnic groups that were thrown into a sack to make Nigeria. All those 371 ethnic groups were in exactly the physical locations in which they presently are now. All that happened was that this artificial construct, like a tent, was built over them, which was now controlled by the colonial architects and builders. The nations were there before Nigeria. If Nigeria goes, the nations will be there after Nigeria. When I hear people say that, oh, where will we go to? Everybody knows their boundaries. Everybody exchanged visitors before the colonials and the intruders came. As Dr. Minyoko has said, so it was in South Africa. There was no war between the Xhosas and the Zulus. They were good neighbors. What we're seeking to do is to get back to the experience and the practice and the habits of being good neighbors. All 371 ethnic groups to be good neighbors. That is the objective. As regards the question of the leaders and their sincerity, it is, as our chair has said, it's not a question of seeking permission from anybody else. It is simply finding resolve amongst ourselves. What they say doesn't matter. What we do is what matters. So if I could volunteer that answer.
Thank you, sir. Can I just ask everybody online? We did bill this event to end at 6 o'clock. Please, may I crave your indulgence? We do have a session later where we'll have some music playing for those who want to stay behind. And we still have our cultural performers who are to come back again and play for us. But we again have many questions. I will bring the question and answer sessions to a close in just a moment, but I just want to crave your indulgence. Can we please extend this just a little bit longer to be able to accommodate some of the important questions, I think. So if I may come to Professor Wanze now. Sir, you made mention about the young people, and there's a really important question here. Kate Anwolu says, there is a large number of intermarriage that shows the young people wants to move forward. How can we gain the trust of the young people as they believe the fault is from the elders, in the Nigerian society? Professor Wanze, are you muted, sir?
Please come again. I was dashing to look for a charging point. My battery was running dangerously low.
Oh, my apologies. Very quickly, you made mention about the young people. So the question is, how can we reach out to them to sort of, because they blame the problem on the elder generation. So what do we do to create trust for them between the elders and the young people as we move forward?
Okay. First and foremost, my presentation was hinged largely on education, the premium I place on education. So first of all, we must make education generally available to all and sundry. All Nigerian citizens must have access to education. Because you see why this is important? With access to education, 75% of the crime and crime disposition in Nigeria will be taken care of. You do not find an educated young man grab an AK-47 and start mowing people down on the streets just because he wants to rob them. Right? You do not have an educated man who has a possibility of reasonable, rewarding engagement. It's running down again.
Sir, don't worry. I think we should let you try and sort out your battery situation as we move on. I think it's wholly unfair on you to keep you suspended this way. Thank you, sir. I think, because there was a very similar question asked by Fred Olayinka was asking that, equally the same question of trust. How do we build trust between the two groups and make that a reality? And I think on that note, I'm going to now hand back. First of all, let me say a huge thank you to everybody that has contributed their questions through today that have asked. I believe a lot of the questions that I haven't asked as yet will be looked at as, of course, Dilip does his remarks now. So you've not been ignored, you've not been left out. It will be responded to one way or another. And some of you are asking where you're going to find this. Please, it's on our YouTube channel. The Fatherland Group YouTube channel is also on the Facebook page. The website, the Fatherland website, it's also there, so that you can go over it. And of course, you can send through whatever questions you may have again to the website, and hopefully it should be dealt with. So I'm just going to say thank you so much to all of you and hand over now to Mr. Dele Ogun, if you will allow me to address him thus, to please.
Thank you, Priscilla, and thank you all the delegates for your patience and all the speakers for your contributions. My closing comments. I start with something very obvious and very basic. Our world has changed. COVID has changed our world. The old world ended in 2019. the new world has begun. And whether we like it or not, we must change. We simply cannot continue to do the things and to think the way we were thinking previously, prior to the COVID intervention. This event demonstrates that the Yoruba and Igbo peoples are determined to change and have decided already that they're going to change. They're changing their relationship. It is a new special relationship. So it is not the British and the Americans alone that will be speaking of a special relationship. From now on, the Igbos and the Yoruba will speak of their special relationship. It is a long journey, and many of the speakers have made that clear. We're journeying back from somewhere very dark, very dirty, very nasty. On one side, the Igbos, there's pain. On the other side, amongst my Yoruba people, there's irritation about all the propaganda that has been directed at them. So the journey will be long. But the journey has begun. It has begun today. In fact, it started before us, as we heard. The handshake across the Niger is a continuation of that long journey. But it's the way that journeys are begun and completed. It is one step at a time. One step after another. So that journey towards the new special relationship is very much underway. 15th of January is ours from now on and forevermore. I've explained that we both had skin in that game. When those boys, the majors, took the step that they did, there was a crisis in the Western region. There was a rigging of the federal elections in the Eastern region, 1964. So that day belongs to us now. And as a result, every single year, 15th of January, this is not a one-off. It's the first of many. Every 15th of January, we will gather like this, because the Yorubas will gather together. Now, coming to the question that many have raised, what about the others? What about the Hausa? What about the Ijo? What about Priscilla's Ogoni people? What about them? The answer is simple. The Fatherland Group's philosophy and vision for Nigeria is simple. It is a union of ethnic groups, as we were and as we will always be. I said it before. Nigeria goes, the British construct called Nigeria goes, the nations will remain. We will continue to have that relationship as we had it before. Good neighbors. So Fatherland Group believes in a federation of nationalities, not artificial states where borders are drawn up anyhow, as they did in Berlin for the maps and the borders of Africa. That is the Fatherland vision. So one relationship at a time. Today we've started with the Igbo-Yoruba relationship. We know that there are issues between the minorities in the Eastern region and the Igbos. Fatherland Group is committed to repairing all the broken walls, all the broken fences, and mending those relationships. But one step at a time. I want to thank all of our functionaries today, our beautiful, eloquent, masterly compere Ms. Priscilla Nwopo from our Ugani people. We're grateful for your assistance. It goes to show that though the Igbos and the Yoruba want to love each other, that we're not forgetting the others who also need loving. But as I explained to some people, that as far as I understand it, polygamy is still a criminal offense in Nigeria at the moment. So it has to be one relationship at a time. I want to thank our master drummer, Ayon the First, Mr. Culture. You're going to hear from him again in a moment to kick off the social side of things. Ayon and I have been working together for a long time. Whenever there's a first of anything, Ayon is there. When we did the first Yoruba National Day in the world, not just in London. It took place in London, but in the world. That was 23rd of September in the year 2000. It was Ayon the First that was there. And here we are again, where we established the 15th of January as the Igbo and Yoruba Day is here again. So Ayon the First, so thank you. Our wonderful songstress, Igbo songstress, Amarachi Atama. Unfortunately, she could not be here with us in person because she lost her father over the Christmas period. And she was striving and struggling to make sure that she'll be here. But she wasn't able to. But we felt her presence in the performance, and you will hear from her again very, very shortly after Ayon the First has drummed us out. I want to thank our chair, Joe Williams, the true rebel, Celtic, original indigene of England. She's the native. You see, all these English, they are the ones who came in and caused trouble. And we've been talking all day about those who come in and cause trouble. She's a true...
They were called Britons.
They were called Britons. They called you Britons.
Tribe, Britons.
They called you Britons, did they?
No, that was our name, Britons.
Britain.
They were one of the original people of the British Isles.
There we are. So I should say a true Brit. That's where it has meaning, a true Brit. We're very, very grateful and for your participation again in taking this message to the Britons, because we firmly believe that there are good people and bad people all over the world. No country has a monopoly of the good, the bad, or the ugly. Everybody has their quota. And amongst the British people, they're true friends of Africa. And we want Joe to help us take that message across to them. I want to thank our birthday, should I say birthday boy? Dare I say? Birthday boy, Professor Emmanuel Nwanze.
Thank you, sir.
Who has so graced this occasion with the insights and the philosophy and the practical measures that he has recommended. And for those who have been asking about the papers, would they be available? Yes, they will. They will be published afterwards. I want to give our Prof a special presence. I was tossing up as to who would be made president of the Igbo and Yoruba Day going forward. I thought very hard about Professor Akintoye, but I have to say that Professor Nwanze has picked it simply by virtue of having his birthday on that very day. So we hereby declare Professor Nwanze as life president of the Igbo and Yoruba Day. Every 15th of January is Igbo and Yoruba Day, and he's our life president, and we'll be celebrating it in this way every single year. Thank you, Prof.
Are you sure I can cope with this toga?
Well, as long as you're living, your life president is as simple as that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor.
Turning to our brilliant Professor Banji Akintoye, truly a father figure to me. You've seen that his journey has been long in this quest to bring our peoples together. And nobody wanted his speech to end. Everybody was enthralled and gripped. I want to, on behalf of the Fatherland Group, to thank him deeply. And although Professor Nwanze has taken the title of Life President of Igbo and Yoruba Day, 15th of January, we want to confer the title of Life President of the Yoruba and Igbo Historical Association on our Professor Banji Akintoye. Thank you, Prof. I then turn to my brother from the East, Timothy Mordu. Thank you, Tim, the son of Arachuku, son of his father truly, Timothy C. Mordu, original. And the second version is very much on par with the original. The standard and the quality in the Mordu family perseveres and is consistent. Thank you, Tim. Then I want to thank Dr. Minyuku, my brother from South Africa. The insights and the experience that he has shared with us have been so valuable, especially that point that there was no conflict between Xhosas and Zulus until the intruders came and then sold the narrative that they will always be killing each other if we're not here to keep them apart. Such a parallel with the Igbo and Yoruba relationship. This my new brother, I love him so much that we've actually resolved to swap names. He understands what I'm saying. I'll be him and he'll be me. It is the beginning of a new brotherhood. Thank you, Dr. Minyuku. And I want to take on board your comments about the need for us to learn from the South African experience, to recognize the reality that we are different, not pretend that we're the same, but open our eyes to the reality that Igbo and Yoruba are different and celebrate that difference. Acknowledge it, don't resent it, embrace it. So I take that on board very much. And you also called for a leader and leadership. Now, I can't be the leader of the Igbos. I do not speak the language. I dare not claim to be the leader of the Yoruba in the presence of great men and great minds like Professor Banji Akintoye. But what I can claim, and what I am claiming, and I dare anybody to challenge me for the title, is leader of the Yorubas and the Igbos, speaking with one voice. Anybody who wants to challenge me, let them step up. But when it comes to those two nations speaking with one voice, I declare myself to be the leader. On that note, I want to thank everybody. As I said, this is the beginning of a journey, or I should say a second base, giving due credit to those who inspired the handshake across the Niger. This is second base. The journey continues, and I want to thank you all and now hand you back to our compere, Priscilla, to introduce the entertainment. Please do remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We need you so we can communicate with you most effectively. Priscilla, I hand back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Before you leave the stage, though, there is a key question that you didn't mention that was reoccurring there, which was the young people, the youth. They're not featured today. They're not represented. And the question is, how do we bring them on board?
Well, good question. Although I consider myself young, youth is relative. And age is but a number, as they say. And I always also say that the mind and the body age at different rates. So though my body may be touching 58 next month, am I 59? Oh, you see, the brain is growing. But the mind is still there. But seriously speaking, the Fatherland Group, we're happy and we're proud to say that we have so many young people involved in that fantastic organization. We cross all ethnic groups who want to walk in the same direction of a policy of good neighbors, constructive relationship, and we cross the genders, we cross the age groups. And but as Professor Mwanze said, these problems that have old roots, it is only by educating the youth to understand the real story, to toss away and turn their backs from the false narratives that have been pushed there by those who are advantaged by our division. Because every situation produces winners and losers. When there's crisis, there are those who profit. That's why many makes their best profit in a war situation. We want peace, not war. And it's by education that we will get what we want. So I hope that answers the question in terms of the young people.
Can I add a quick information, just for information? Priscilla, one of the issues about the young people that we have actually touched on it, not in this detail, but as Stella said, the Fatherland Group thinks, and we have quite a few young people there. But the key point about the young people program that would have featured in my own speech was the issue of taking the young people, the diasporan group, because we already figured out that the next 10 years, that the diasporan group from the next generation are it. They will determine the future of Nigeria one way or the other because of there. So there is something that I personally am interested in that, and the relationships we encourage our young people to continue to work together. The diasporans are doing it far better than I can imagine any other place that's doing it. I mean, Lagos is obviously a cosmopolitan, so there is something there. So it's not that we haven't actually more or less dealt with those specific issues. I know that we believe very seriously on the future of our young ones, and they will determine the future of Nigeria 10 years, especially the diasporans, Yoruba, Igbo, and other youth. So that's something that I want you to, those who have questions, to take home message. They should watch the space. It is something that's part of our strategy going forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Tim Mordu Jr. Much appreciated. Thank you, Dili, also for Dili Ogun, for dealing with the question as well. And as Dili said earlier, we're going to continue now with our cultural performances, and he's been so patient with us today. Once again, can we welcome our Mr. Culture, Mr. Iron the First.
Ẹnu tí mo fi ń polówó, ẹnu èyí tí mo fi ń kolóyè o, ẹnu tí mo fi ń kọba, tí mo fi ń kí àwọn òǹjòyè, ẹnu tí mo fi ń kolórí ìlú, tí rọ́kọ̀tà wàdà kọ́ ẹnu ọ̀hún ni mo fi ń kí gómìnà láwùjọ. Lẹ́yìn aláwòrán bí wọ́n gbẹ náà lọ mi tó yọ sí onílù ọmọ bàbá oníjó. Ọmọ tó yọ sí owó yìí ìran bàbá tí wà kúkú níṣẹ́ orí ọmọ ọmọ bá ṣọrun. Bampola Ola, Tirokota Dako, Ado Kiola, no Baba Twaniton, Banqui, Lu Baba, Luijo Shaurode, Tirokota Dako, Ado Kimo Kukujo Gwen, Law, Baba, Toby Milamoni, Jacolu, Comarero, Torejo, Matoyo, City Bobo Junior, Berry, Ajoda and Aju. Èèyàn tó bá sọ mí nù ló sọ yàn nù ọmọ tó yọ sí ẹ ní bárí ní ẹnu lórí èèyàn rẹ ọ̀rí àmì ọmọ bá ṣọ. Yoruba and Igbo come together as one body, as one people, no difference. Let's embrace one another. Understand what the drum is going to be singing or saying, please chorus along. Thank you very much. I remain Mr. Culture. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Culture. I love the way you did that just then. Our diversity. Amazing. Thank you. And now we're going to hear from Amarachi. Can our DJ please take it away? Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, the national anthem of the newly formed Ududuwa Nation.
Everybody in London have heard that Heritage Television has come up with something new. All your functions and celebrations can now be multi-camera live stream that was only reserved for the rich and famous. Having a function in London can be viewed clean and clear immediately from any part of the world. Trust Heritage TV to give you a better reach. Heritage Television also does photography that will make you the envy of all your friends and family. Heritage Television is the best. All your functions like birthdays, funerals, weddings, church anniversaries or harvest. Heritage Television is the master. We are in the heart of London with an ultra-modern equipped studio. You can call us on 020-800-46100 or email us info@heritagetv.co.uk or mobile 0734 1234 560. Heritage Television will do you proud.